Why is it not letting me? Oh, sorry, one sec, guys. I won't be a minute. Be with you in just a minute. Has anyone else noticed that Facebook's being really weird lately?
It's always weird.
I find it's being particularly odd lately.
You've just gone live.
But oh, I think we are streaming live now.
You are live.
Yeah, on Facebook.
Yep.
Yeah. Oh, great. Hello, Facebook. Right, I'll just leave that to do its thing. I can't see it, so I'm just going to trust that's all okay. Who else has joined? Liz has joined. Hi, darling. Good to see you. Jane, hello. Hi, who else has just joined that I missed? Anyone? No, we're here. Beautiful. What a nice turnout. And we might have some more join as well. So let's just see. I've got you all. Well, some of you are muted, some of you are unmuted. But if you could just mute yourselves just for now, but we will be creating time for us to actually have a conversation and chat. And I really want your contributions today because Tamsin and I don't want it to be just about what she and I think. We want to hear what you have to say. And I think Tamsin and I are very much in agreement that women need more spaces to be able to come together and just have vulnerable, open conversation about what's important to us. And which kind of leads into, this is actually an evolution membership masterclass call. I host evolution membership, and we every month have a couple at least, sometimes 3, masterclasses on the topic of the month. And the topic this month is feminine leadership. But I thought, because it's Tamsin, and I just love what she has to say, and because of the importance of this subject, I just didn't want to keep it secret inside our membership. I wanted to kind of get it out there in public. Hi, more people joining. Hey, Zena. Hey,
hello there.
Hi. I wanted to kind of get it out more into the public space, and yeah, and I kind of wanted to give people a little bit of an insight into what it's like to be an evolution member as well, just to get a feel for the kind of women that we are, and from all different walks of life, and yet we all have the same passions, the same vulnerabilities, the same desires. You know, we're all on the same page usually, and the membership is a place where we really just kind of, it's our space, isn't it, where we come together and in conversation, and we share, and we choose a theme every month that just gives us a focus, and it's a part of our life that we just choose to, you know, just to go a little more deeply into. So this month it's leadership. Next month it's sex and intimacy, which I can't wait for. Previously we've had goals, desires and dreams. We've done money and finance. We've covered pleasure, self-care. I know I'm missing some, but you know, we just have a different theme every month. So tonight we are speaking all about feminine leadership. And Tamsin and I were introduced probably only, what, a couple of months ago. Tamsin, do you want to wave so everyone knows which one you are? There she is. And we've actually been getting to know each other. We've never met in person. We've been getting to know each other just through like phone conversations and Zoom conversations focused on feminine leadership. It's just what like gets her out of bed in the morning. It's something that I'm very excited about. And yeah, we've been getting to know each other and thought, hey, let's take one of these conversations live. And we agreed tonight that we wouldn't introduce each other through bios. We decided that we would start this evening with sharing how we think we're leaders in the world. And as we share how we think we're leaders in the world, I want to invite those of you who are here live on the Zoom call to jump over into the chat. Actually, if you could all mute yourselves just now, that would be great, because I'm getting a little bit of background noise from somewhere. But those of you live on the Zoom call, if you can just jump into the chat, and while we're sharing why we think we're leaders, could you share how you think you're a leader? And those of you watching on Facebook, I don't know how to check that. So maybe I'll check later, or maybe I'll figure it out halfway through the call, but feel free to comment as well, and I'll do my best to find the comments. Tamsin, how are you a leader in the world?
You love to start with like the hardest question ever, I think.
Come on, you know.
No, but I mean, I guess I want to, you know, I'm a bit of a philosopher at heart, I guess, so you just have to bear with me on that a little bit, everyone. But when I sit with groups of women, it is the hardest question, I think, quite often, because we're not asking how someone else leads. We're not asking about the third person. We're not supporting someone else. We're actually saying, like, this is how we do it. And to be honest, there's not like a lot written about how women lead, actually. There's a lot written about very transactional kinds of leadership. There's a lot written about, you know, all of these things. So I guess I'll say how I lead, which is an evolution, right, of self, of understanding. And I believe that to lead really effectively, my job is to know myself and be very comfortable in my own shoes, that I get clear enough in my head that I can hear other people, hold two truths at the same time, and be as wise as I can. And as I say, I am a bit of a philosopher, but I've sat a lot in board environments. I've supported women who are on boards. And I tell you, the most important thing to do as a leader is to be able to say, I don't know the answer and I'm willing to learn. And so I guess my interest in feminine traits of leadership, so not, I'm very interested in women in leadership, but feminine traits more broadly, is that quite often they're like viewed as not really leadership traits, you know? So things like collaboration, care, custodianship, you know, candor, there's lots of C's. And so I guess that's how I want to lead. And how do I lead? A bit of everything, a bit of transactional, kind of get it done, shut things off so I can work through it. But I think the most wise part of me is the part of me that I need to be really quiet to hear. And that's the bit I think that's going to make me powerful as a leader and other people as well. And there's lots of stories, obviously, that go on behind that. But I think one of the saddest things for me from working with women, and like thousands of women around the world and in various, in London, but all over Africa as well, is when I see women that don't either believe that they're a leader, even though they truly are, because of the way things are structured and seen. And that happens, you know, I invite people to something like, well, I don't know why you're inviting me. I'm not a leader. You definitely are. And also I want people to feel as comfortable as they can in their own shoes. So if we can explore the feminine, leading with the feminine and leading with the masculine as a part of us, and get really comfortable with that, it becomes much more accessible to everybody to believe that they are one and to be really good at doing that. So maybe I'll pause there.
Yeah, no, that's brilliant. When you said you've spoken to and worked with thousands of women around the world, Africa, London, and other parts, can you just give a super quick insight into what that work was?
So I co-founded an organization across Africa. So it's obviously a lot of different countries. People were saying, so investors, corporates and the like were saying, there aren't any women for board roles, and we knew them. And so myself and Marcia Ashong, who's CEO of the business, we went and mapped them across 50 countries and now have 1,000 women across those 50 countries. And so spend a lot of time with people who say, I'm looking for board members. And if I speak at an event or something about that, I'll say, well, if you can't find them and haven't spoken to us, you haven't tried. So part of it is about accountability, but in that journey of interviewing and meeting people who are potentially eligible to join and, you know, suitable for board roles, you know, I'd spend a lot of time saying, well, who are you? What do you want to do? Because your board journey can be a very creative one. You know, your corporate journey or whatever obviously is, you know, you kind of moving up the ladder potentially, depending on, you know, where you're coming from. But in the board role, I mean, you could really do anything. You could sit on a nonprofit, you could go into impact investing, you know, you could really think about lots and lots of different pathways. And so in talking about where they want to be and where they see themselves, a lot of reflective stuff came back on, well, I'm not really sure if I've ever really contributed in the way I should on a board. And when you're speaking to the top brass, you know, the top people, and they're still experiencing this sense of who am I as a leader and how do I get really comfortable with that, you realize there needs to be more words for this and different kinds of conversations. So that's on the board side. And then in London, I'm a member of a club called the Conduit, which is for academics, nonprofits, corporates, all interested in kind of changing the world in a positive sense. And I've set up their women's network for them. So hosted dinners with about 200 women on like what it means to them to be a leader, really open, like no, not to say it's masculine or feminine, but just like, what is it for you? And through that really uncovered some, like through stories, uncovered some great truths for ourselves. Stories is how we learn, I think. So I'm really excited to hear lots of stories from you all tonight as well, if you're willing to share them. Now we're live on Facebook, so all up to you, but I think stories are the most powerful.
It is. Storytelling is key. And I've noticed that Kelly's been the first brave one to go into the chat and say how she's a leader. And right there, the fact that, because I was watching the chat thinking, I don't know how, I wasn't timing it, but a few minutes has gone by and I said, like, please share in the chat if how you're being a leader in the world. If you think you're a leader in the world, how are you leading in the world? And there's just crickets. And I think right there, that's a piece that, for us women, it's to find our confidence and self-trust and self-belief to actually say, well, yes, I lead in X way. So Kelly said, I guide women back to their innate creative selves to access and trust their soul's voice. I lead by example and sharing my process. Yeah, Sonia's dived in. Awesome. I think there are many ways a woman leads. There are, and I imagine you're still typing, Sonia. I'm a big believer that, well, like you started to say, or were saying that, Tamsin, that for me to be a leader, I have to know how to lead myself, and I have to lead through self-love. So I have to come home. For me to be a leader in any capacity out in the world, I have to actually have my inner world sorted first. So the way I would lead anybody else is to check in with me first. I'm a big advocate for responding to life, not reacting to life. I don't think you can be a good leader at any level, in any capacity, if you're in reaction. So emotional mastery is really key. But knowing my inner world is really important. Really, really, really knowing myself, really acknowledging all aspects of myself, noticing the parts of me that need some work, and doing that work and taking myself through that healing journey. I think that's really important. And then I can be a leader in my household. I can be a better parent. I can be a leader in my community. So the School of Self-Love is one of my communities. I can show up and I can be authentic. Authenticity is like my key word. And I don't think you can lead yourself or it out in the world without authenticity. And yeah, like I couldn't be the coach that I am. I couldn't hold space for the communities of women that I hold and lead them if I wasn't able to do that for myself first.
Yeah.
But it's taken me quite a few years as well to actually acknowledge that I'm a leader. It's a really weird one. It seems like such a masculine word. It's like my upbringing, my conditioning says to me that men are leaders, and there's a few women leaders, but wow, they got balls, those women, or ovaries, as my last coach says. But they've got balls, and there's something about them that I don't have that. Like I'm more of an introvert. I don't have that presence about me. I've always thought leaders were men until now.
It's really, I mean, I think when I was 23 and like working for a state premier, I thought that this whole women thing was like my mum's problem and whatever. And obviously like culture hasn't shifted as far, but obviously things are changing. Like workforces are changing. There's lots of women running companies. There's like, it is dramatic, but I think what is really interesting to me is the inner journey and that sense of I feel happy and comfortable with who I am and I'm doing this. And that I think is a really interesting dynamic, because there's this phenomena that we see. It's called the double bind. I don't know if anyone's ever heard of the double bind. There's some nodding. Yes. So the double bind is that as a woman, even with other women, we think this, we are expected to be feminine traits, caring, custodian in our approaches, thinking about the bigger picture, the community. But when we do that as a leader, we're liked but not seen as good leaders. And this is very well researched. And when we lead in a very strong way, which a lot of women do, and it's a natural way of leading, and it's perfectly brilliant, they do that, they're seen as great leaders, but they're not liked because they don't have those feminine qualities. And so as we kind of traverse through this pathway, there is sort of moments in time where we have to make this choice. Do I want to be liked or do I want to lead? And I think if we like explore like all of the traits of leadership and start to value things like collaboration and all of these things, if we look at Jacinta Ardern in New Zealand, I mean, she's amazing, right? And she is a very strong leader, but she leads with the feminine, you know, really listening, seeing the whole big picture, not kind of the bit that she wants to see. Like, it's quite a beautiful way of leading. And I think most people are quite inspired, you know, by what she's doing. So it's entirely possible, but, you know, you could argue that there's no one above her, right? She kind of gets to call the shots. And for a lot of us, it's not like that, right? We're in systems that are not allowing that. And so it requires then a lot more inner work, as you were saying, Katie, you know? I think for me personally, I've been through a process myself where I was leading in the way I thought I should lead, you know, in a way mimicking lots of different people's leadership styles. And most of those people were men, because that's just the nature of a workforce in general. And I got to a point in my life where I didn't want to do it. I did not want to do that. Like, my body broke, let's say that, right? I couldn't sleep. I was eating, I wasn't putting weight on. Like, I was like, what is going on? And I spoke to my coach, who said, well, how do you feel in your body? I was like, I have no idea. Like, I have no clue. Is that important? And or, you know,
I love how you said, is that important?
what do you love? And I was like, well, I'm not really sure, because it's about achieving, doing. And so I think it's, you know, finding your own leadership style, whether it's a masculine and feminine or a blend, which is always a blend, in many respects, is a process of you finding out who you are. And the reason I think that talking about the feminine traits is so important is that the more we feel we can bring those and lead with those, the more comfortable we're going to be in more spaces. And I think when we're comfortable and the good, happy hormones in our body are working because we're finding things enjoyable and pleasurable, that's when we're creative, that's when we're powerful. And that's when we bring our best version of ourselves, not just in a work environment, but in a family environment for yourself. And so I think it's very hard to separate what you do in an organization and who you are as a person, because we don't just bring our skills to the table, we bring who you are, which is like a big thing, right? Like, someone said to me yesterday, what do people say you are? You know, and I said, what do you mean? And she said, well, for her, it's something particular. And she goes, and I know I need to do more of that because it's what I bring. And, you know, I was thinking about it, and I think people say to me, I bring energy. And I mean, I don't mean to, it just kind of happens. But why not lean into those things, whatever they are, and be more of ourselves? And it's a lot easier, you know. It's much easier to be yourself than someone else. And that may sound very simplistic. You know, I think maybe I'll pause there. I mean, what are people's reflections? I've got a comment here. What are the markers of success? Who defines it? Where do we learn it? So I love that question. I mean, maybe I'll ask, like, what do you think the traits of great leaders are? Like, how would you describe any trait that you think, when you see that is a leader you respect? Creating dialogue, definitely great leadership trait. Listening to perspective, yeah. Empowering people, yeah.
I like what you said while we wait for the chat to come through. I like what you said about being more you,
yeah,
and valuing that. Like, a leader, we need to, I will only be led by somebody I can tell is authentic and I can rely on them, and they have that depth of relationship with themselves. But you say it's easier, and it is, but there's kind of a journey to that for most people as well, because a lot of people actually would say they don't know who they are, so it's easier to wear the mask.
Most definitely. And I can I think anyone that teaches you anything that hasn't been through it is probably not a great teacher. And not that I'm teaching you anything today, but I speak from an absolute perspective of experience of not knowing and thinking, well, is this a life fully lived or not?
Yeah.
And if it isn't, then, well, I really need to work on that and think about it. And I really love all the things everyone's saying, listening, vulnerable, resonate with this almost unknowing. I love that. Yeah, review and change when needed. And so I'll tell you, I'd like you to now tell me a leader that we all kind of could relate to, that represents these traits for you. I mean, it's one of my favorite questions to ask. Brene Brown. Yes.
Everyone says Brene.
Could be anyone, male or female, but that has these traits that you've kind of described here, vulnerability. And Barack Obama, Michelle Obama, she's amazing. Jacinta Ardern, yeah, also amazing. Yeah. But, I mean, feel free to keep writing them. But I don't know about you, but it's not a long list, hey? Oprah.
I was wondering when somebody was going to write Oprah. Yeah. Adrian Huffington. Yeah.
I think there are these kind of leaders, but when you think about it, it's kind of slim pickings actually. And I think it for me it's so interesting because there's this big gap between what we want to see and what we see, and maybe that gap exists within us as well, right? Of what we want to be and what we can be in organizations or in our families, or what we want to be. And I think one of the things about the traits that you've all mentioned, there was this, so when people talk about feminine traits, everyone's like, well, how do you even prove it? Does it even exist? What does it even mean? And so this is a part of what I've been thinking about. And there was a survey done of about 64,000 people in 14 countries across all different walks of life. And they described what they would see as feminine traits of leaders. And that was these things, which is quite extraordinary. And they found that there was very little difference between countries, whether they were more emerging markets or established markets. Like, we have a very strong perspective. And in this same big international insight survey that was done, they asked, what kind of leader do we need for the future? And I think everyone agrees with this. And so I find it really interesting when we start to think about it. Well, if these traits are not highly seen, how do we experiment with them? Like, how do we bring them into our daily experience ourselves, right? Who's demonstrating them? Like, we could watch Oprah every day. Perhaps we could, think about other things, but I don't know. It's not something that we're going to just immediately start to evolve into based on normal day-to-day activities for all of us. And this, I think, is really, really interesting. I mean, Katie, do you have practices for bringing more of these sort of more feminine traits into you? I certainly have.
Well, do you know, as you were speaking just then, what occurred to me when you said, we could watch Oprah every day and sort of learn, but there's an element of, because there's a transformation required in all of us to go from understanding what leadership is from the masculine to then understanding what leadership is bringing in the feminine. So we're sort of kind of all aware that that's required, but then it's like, so any transformation begins with awareness first. So then, like I think you were saying earlier, we need to bring a language to it. So while we kind of know that, yeah, we need to bring the feminine in, well, I could watch Oprah every day to start to sort of learn, like, watch how does she do it, but what am I actually watching for? Like, what's the vocabulary? What are the words that are the feminine qualities of leadership, and what are the words, the masculine qualities of leadership? And I sort of want to, like, I feel like I need to know. And by the way, I have a bit of an idea, which is why I'm hosting a talk like this, and I know you have a bit of an idea, and actually I know pretty much every woman on this call right now has a bit of an idea, but we have to, like, what are those words? So did you ask me, how do I, what did you ask me? How do I bring what did you ask me?
How, I'm really interested in exploring, like, if we can't see it in our leadership, although there are a few people, how do we bring it, I guess, is the question. And I am always interested in people's practices on this, because I think I learn something every time. You know, I don't think it's definitive, and I'm just really interested in.
Yes. So for me, it's really practicing listening.
Yeah.
Like really listening, and also dropping my ego, which, by the way, my ego beats me up and gives me a hard time and says I should be better. But it also says, well, I'm the expert and I know this, this, and this. So I could go into a like a meeting, or I don't know, like a dinner scenario, and I could go in as the expert in XYZ. But then you've always got that little voice in the back going, no, you're not really. But if I just allow myself to not listen to the little voice and to not listen to the big voice and just listen, then suddenly I realize I know nothing. And I could learn so much from all of these amazing people in the room. If I could just drop my comparison ego voice and drop that bigger, I know everything voice, which is just a protection piece, and just listen, I could learn so much. And I think the masculine model of leadership that I've learned has been just to tell, and I know everything. And actually I've got a wounded part, but I'm going to ignore that, and I'm going to react, not respond to what's going on in this room right now. And I'm going to order you, and I'm not going to listen to you. And it doesn't matter to me how it makes you feel, because this is what's going to happen. It's kind of like, it's how I was brought up. It's how my dad brought me up. Bless his heart. He loves me. But, you know, it was like, there's no conversation, Katie. And I wasn't heard. It was, this is how it's going to happen. So I feel like I'm, as a leader, having to learn to, it's a massive surrender piece. It's huge vulnerability required. It's a major dropping of the ego. And it's a, you know what, showing up in a space, even if I am leading something, it's actually going in with an attitude of, I know what I know, but maybe I know nothing. And maybe I just need to listen and receive. Maybe you all know better than me. Maybe you could show me the way. Maybe I need to be the voice for all of you.
Yeah.
Does that make sense? Am I making any sense?
Yeah, no, it does make sense. And I think you're right. I mean, watching Oprah every day is not going to be necessarily transformative. Like, it requires a lot of digging into, like any learning, it requires digging into the hard bits, the things that are triggering us in some way, or however you want to describe it, that are frustrating for us, and thinking why they're frustrating, and moving past them, and then getting the next one and doing the same thing until we find our own, like, unique pathway. But one of the things that I found really interesting, so there's lots of different feminine traits. We've talked about kind of collaborative, authentic, people talking about the vulnerability dimension, seeing things as a whole system, long-term thinking. So there are all of these really interesting traits, and there are lots of different ways that these traits are, like different dimensions where these traits kind of play out. And one that I read about just this week, which was really interesting, there's a book called The Master and His Emissary. It's terrifyingly big, and I wouldn't say I've tackled it yet, but I'm really interested in it, and I've started to have a look at it. And it's looking at the left and the right hemisphere of the brain. And it's, this is just a direct quote from the book, I've just got it here. It says, the left hemisphere talk is convincing because it cuts out what it doesn't like. It's the Berlusconi of the brain. It controls the media, and the right side doesn't have a voice to construct the same arguments, but it has deep insight to add. Einstein said, the intuitive mind is a sacred gift and the rational mind is a faithful servant. But we've created a society and systems that honor the servant and have forgotten the gift. And so why I really love the way he thinks about the brain is because he describes the left hemisphere as all of the masculine traits without saying them in that way in any sense, and the right as all these feminine traits. And so, in fact, the debate is happening out there, but it's also like literally happening in your own mind, you know, which part, which, and both of these sides of the brain, you can't do anything with just one side of that, obviously, but to explore your own creativity, to explore how you want to operate in the world, and to kind of really allow both of those dimensions of our personalities to be displayed is where we can offer the most insight. And for me personally, I started to explore somatic coaching or somatic related practices. I don't know if anyone knows what somatic practices are. No. So there's this, I'll give you a very short, you know, we've got a bit of time, but I'll give you a summary. If you think it's interesting to go more, Katie, I'm happy to dig into it a bit more. But basically, there was a psychologist who discovered that when people said in a psychology session, I kind of feel like this, maybe it's like this, he called it a felt sense of something. And when people started talking in that way of it kind of feels like, and it's an it and it's not me, and it's in the body, that they were really much more likely to have an effective session. But the insight that's come from that is that we learn from what we feel in our body. And it can be an emotion, but it can be an ache, it can be a, you know, whatever it is. But our brain is not just sitting up there thinking away on its own, it's getting signals from the outside world, signals of what is pleasant and pleasurable to us, signals of what isn't, signals when we're well or sick, and intuitive signals. So when we think and problem solve in a rational sense, you know, in a numbers sense or in the fact sense, we're only accessing a very small portion of our knowledge because we can only access that at any particular point in time. But our intuitive sense, that felt sense of our body is like, something, I'm missing something here. And one of the things that I've also been asking at these dinners is, like, who applies this kind of thinking in decision making in their organizations? And the most intuitive decision making that I've heard about is actually someone that was in the British military who was really talking a little bit about how if something doesn't feel right in a high stakes situation where lives are at stake, that is taken very, very seriously. But you know, if we could translate that into all of our lives, if we're hanging around with a bunch of women, sometimes you can say, it just doesn't feel right. And everyone's like, yeah, I get it. But in a boardroom, I'm not sure we would feel comfortable saying that or understanding what that meant. And emotion in a boardroom, I mean, it's not seen as credible in many respects, but yet our intelligence utterly embraces that. And in fact, we are what we feel at any point in time, right? We're not who we think we were. We are just as present as we can be with what all of the things we've learned, how that's engaging with what we're interacting with now, and how do we make great decisions. And so I really feel very strongly that the intelligence of our bodies and intuition should really play a greater role. But obviously that only starts when we get to know that part of ourselves, and that's a really a process, but a beautiful one. I don't know, my brain goes 24 hours a day, and so when I was doing it, I was like, God, this is relaxing, and you know, and intuitive and interesting, and reminding me that sometimes we don't have words for things, and that is actually completely okay.
Yes, exactly. And I love thinking about, you know, I always imagine that, you know, that my brain, my head is the home of the masculine and my body is the home of the feminine. And I'm very aware that we've only learned to value what's going on up in here, and we haven't learned to value what's going on down in our bodies, and to trust that. We've learned to trust what our brain says and not what our body says. But the irony is, I don't think I've ever met a woman that says I fully trust myself. Because in here we can't, like in here there's so much going on that's opposing. How can we trust that? We only develop self-trust when we can actually tune in with our body and our intuition. and we deeply fully know ourselves. That's where trust comes from.
Yeah, I think that's right. And I also think that that we aren't our feelings and we aren't our thoughts. And this, I want to go into consciousness because I will do a terrible job, but these are like really interesting insights, and and rather than, you know, who we are, but it's this process of registering them, acknowledging them, and working through them. And obviously this is a personal journey piece, but a piece of research I read recently on people that really develop their consciousness. So basically there was an analysis done. It was a Harvard study. I don't have the exact name of the study here, but if anyone's interested, I can send it to you. But basically it looked at people that had reached this level of development where they could separate out their emotions and their thoughts and their feelings and hold two truths, you know, together and really try and problem solve, which for me is, you know, really a great way of interacting and very effective if you're a transformational leader, which is leaders that help other people to transform at the same time. They looked at who had reached this particular level of, you know, psychological development, I guess, or human social development, and they then measured their performance against people that weren't at that level, and they had really significantly outsized performance, you know, across all categories. But yet again, like, these kind of conversations are not necessarily ones that we're having in our workplaces. So I think, I guess the interesting thing for us is that this inner work we're doing that feels entirely personal is not entirely personal. Like, you are affecting the world around you, your families, your workplaces, and it's going to kind of boost everything. But it does rely on the fact that we're engaging with the masculine and the feminine in us, that we're trusting these insights to teach us what we need to learn at any point in time to be able to, you know, live fully and be a great contributor.
I love that. I want to change the subject ever so slightly to flow state, because I think right there is there's two definitions of flow state. There's the flow state that we've been talking about for a long time that to me feels very masculine, and then there's the flow state that I think is more feminine. Would you bear, and then I do want to, I'm going to scroll back up through the chat. I want to have I didn't see and read, but I want to actually acknowledge what everybody's written in terms of how they're leading in the world. I just think it would be really nice to share that. But do you mind talking a little bit about flow state? Because I know this is something that you're really interested in as well.
Yes, I'm really interested in it, and I have a learner's L plates on, but really delving into it because I think it's such a beautiful thing. Does anyone here, kind of just by a show of hands, know what a flow state is or have heard of it?
Flow state. So Rebecca, Kelly, Liz. Most people.
So I don't think everyone has heard of it, but it's something we've all experienced, and it's now something that a lot of people are trying to work out how we can bring it more into our daily lives. So basically, has anyone ever had a moment when they were doing something that they utterly loved and they just lost track of time completely? It was like they had no sense of time. They have no sense of anyone else in the room. They were just utterly absorbed in what they were doing. Has anyone had that experience? Yeah. Sorry about my Band-Aid on my thumb, everybody. It's a Band-Aid on my thumb. But I think we've all experienced that. And so that is a flow state. It's moments where you push yourself beyond where you would normally go, but not too far. So you're not in a stress state. You're actually in a really accelerated state, and you tend to feel really energized, and you have a sense of oneness, of peacefulness, and you're actually really productive at the same time. So there's a really interesting book if people are interested in this. There's many, but this particular one is wonderful. It's called Stealing Fire. And it really explores, you know, why flow states are important. And one of the things that I think is really, really important, if I go back to this kind of idea of body work and understanding your body, when we start to orient towards things that are pleasurable in our life and in our day through understanding our body and engaging, we start to build up this kind of resilience where flow states are much easier to engage with, and where we have a different kind of sense of, I suppose, joy and wonder in the world around us. And so I think for me, one of the challenges I've seen in the flow state, context is it's all about, adventure sports and the military and, all of these kind of very macho things. And everyone talks about the brain science and the this and that. And the brain science is very interesting, actually. But, I wonder if there's also not ways to get into flow states when you gather. I mean, when I gather with women, I feel like I lose track of time. I'm in a complete zone sometimes. And so I think there is a whole other section of this idea of flow that isn't explored, because it's not about individuals skiing down a mountain, all the other kinds of things they're talking about, but actually how we engage with each other. And then, because I think my hunch is that there is something about the way we gather that also will allow for that. And that's something, so I guess we've all had COVID projects. So we've been at home doing different kinds of things. One of my main COVID project is actually working with now a very good friend of mine who I only met twice before the COVID situation hit. We spend many, many hours each week looking at the feminine dimension of flow and whether there's more in this, because everything that's written about it is written by men. Even the book I was citing on the traits of female leadership, the 64,000 people that were interviewed around the world, written by 2 men. And I think it's so important to have women's perspectives out there on these kind of topics, because, as we're talking today, all of the ways we're expressing ourselves and our own leadership style and whatever, we come at things from a different kind of place. And so I think maybe the most important thing on flow states is just that when we can find that aha moment, that's when we're at our most productive and at our most happiest. And so it's really important to kind of explore it a lot more. But it's an emerging area of research, Katie.
Yeah, no, it's interesting because I brought it up because I happened to do a Google search flow state a few weeks ago, and all of these YouTube videos came up, and it was like full on like adventure sport, extreme sport. I was like, oh, that's not the feeling I have in my body when I consider what flow state is. I don't want to go extreme, like skiing down a mountain, doing a black run, that's not, for me, that wouldn't be my flow state.
So true. And I mean, your flow state is what brings you joy. It's super unique to people. I mean, there's lots of ways people bring flow states on, but there's something so beautiful here about flow is what you're seeing when you see children playing.
Yes.
And so there is so much about the human experience that's beautiful when we allow it to be beautiful, because you can see children playing and find it stressful. You can see children playing and find it beautiful. You need to allow yourself to find the joy that's really deeply within you and express it is a big part of how we find these kind of flow states. Like for me, I've set up lots of different ventures. I'm very driven by social impact. I've set up a technology hub in Cape Town focused on, really base of the pyramid type innovation in many respects, and done all kinds of things. I don't think I did any of it in a flow state. I did it in a sense of obligation for what I should do for the world, which I think was an honorable set of criteria, but I was totally burning myself out for sure. And so I think flow states is really about coming home to who you are and leading with that, combined with your values, combined with what you want to achieve. So I think it's maybe less about what you do and more about who you are. And then obviously you can bring in these kind of elements of timelessness and spacelessness and all of these things through movement and other things, but it naturally in our lives, I think it comes from finding out who you are. And as that changes, staying in touch with that.
Yeah, and as you're saying that, what comes to me is having your own sort of guiding question before you do anything be, what would feel good for me? Not what do I think is the right thing to do? Because you're right, what you've done in your career is incredibly honorable. It's amazing. I really did have to hold myself back from reading your entire bio tonight. And there's that, what would feel good for me? How could I do this in a way, so the masculine, how could I do this in a way that feels, the feminine, good for me? And that would be bringing flow in, wouldn't it?
Yes, yes, it would. I've been doing this practice, talking about practices, where I basically very simply orient to my senses. And so I'll just sit, rather than like breathing meditation, I'll sit and I will, if something smells good to me, I'll focus on that. If my eyes find something, whether it's a color or a painting, and that feels good to me, I'll focus on that. In any way, alerting my senses. And it's basically building a muscle of knowing what feels good to me. Because I think when we say it, we start to intellectualize it, and that's not it. Like, our body doesn't work that way. And so we need to build this muscle of, and these are not like big pleasures. Like, it could be, there's a glass of water and I'm really thirsty, and that makes me feel so good to look at that glass of water. And what I love about this method is that I could be in a very stressful situation, in a business or whatever context, and look at something in that room and orient towards that and go, geez, I love that color. That color makes me feel good. Where do I feel that in my body? Come back and then go back into that conversation. And so it's about presencing yourself, as well as about orienting towards something pleasurable for you. It doesn't mean ignoring things that are bad feelings. It just means not getting overwhelmed by them. Our body has beautiful cues to tell us what we need at any point in time if we listen to it. And this is more regenerative ways of leading. And I tell you, when I wasn't orienting, I wasn't a better leader, right? I wasn't a better listener. If we talk about those traits, vulnerability, listening, it was less presence, and so I think, I sometimes say who we are is what we feel at any moment in time. Like, it's almost as simple as that. And so to get as close to that as possible is living a full life where you are as close to your aha moments as you can possibly be, as flow states often called, as a series of aha moments, that just keep happening to you.
Yeah, totally. Sonia, you were a woman after my own heart, where you said a great glass of wine. You said you meant that in reference to looking at the glass of water, right? And I was thinking, or a glass of wine. Ellie said at school, flow state is seen as the holy grail, the place where children will learn the most and the deepest. Yeah, totally. Yeah.
About intrinsic motivation. There's a really beautiful educationalist in London, and he actually got in touch with me recently about how do we develop intrinsic motivation, because that's when everything shifts. And intrinsic motivation is what you want to do. Actually, it's quite simple. And I mean, it requires us to know ourselves pretty well, and let go of some versions of ourselves that maybe aren't working for us so well. But in leadership development literature, they talk about one of the biggest challenges of moving from a manager to a leader is that sometimes there are things that you valued yourself on your whole life, whether it's I'm a great accountant, or I'm really good at, I don't know, doing strategy analysis, or whatever the thing is that you do. And when you move into a leadership role, you're required to give that up, because it's not your job anymore. You're required to then lead other people. But one of the biggest challenges is that sometimes we don't know who we are if we give that other thing up. And so we don't move, we don't shift. And we become quite dysfunctional. So if you think about it in a leadership context, a manager that's trying to do your job is like very annoying and not very good, as a rule. But that giving things up piece, things that we think we are, is a very, very challenging process. It's very difficult to you almost can't come to it on your own. So it requires some beautiful holding space around you, friends, or breakdowns, which is my route. Wouldn't recommend it. But I think this process of letting go of older versions is very essential. And that, in a sense, is what we're talking about on feminine leadership. It's like, if we're not embracing this full version of ourselves, how do we do that more effectively?
Yeah. Sonia's asked a question. I love that, intrinsic motivation. Yeah, I wish my son had intrinsic motivation for school. But is this more for the entrepreneur, or, sorry, my screen moved. Is this more for the entrepreneur, as it can be challenging in an organization?
Well, I think you can do it anywhere. I think in a way it's about working through the things around you that are challenging you one by one. And so if there's things that are challenging you within your organization, thinking about what it's bringing up in you, is there a boundary that's being crossed? How is this playing out? It might mean that you need to leave your organization, depending on the organization. But I think there are many, many, many people who've been in much more difficult situations than a bad organizational experience, who have managed to maintain their intrinsic motivation. I think it is not easy. It's a real discipline. But that freedom. If you think about a leader like Nelson Mandela, he was jogging in his cell every day. The first thing he did when he left Robben Island is went and saw one of the guards who was sick to go and see if he was okay. And his motivation came from somewhere else. I wouldn't say we're all going to be a Mandela character, but it's an example that I know better than others. And so I think a lot of it is the fight we have with ourselves, and resolving that. And that's not to mean we're not surrounded by difficult circumstances, but there are ways of kind of working through it. I think that's where people like Katie come in to, and I didn't like hearing any of this when I was being coached by someone. So if you're not enjoying this, I get it. It's really hard, and it's really hard to listen to when you're going through something that's very, very tough. Like it might even make you mad, because it's not easy. But I think that this is the pathway, really, to learning about yourself, and moving out of situations that are bad for you and finding the one that is right for you. Because if we're uncomfortable, maybe that's the thing that's telling you that there's a different pathway to be taking.
Yeah. Beautifully said. I really just want to go back up the chat and just acknowledge what everybody shared about how they're leading in the world, because I just think it's important, and we'll see what comes from it. And I definitely want to look at sustaining the feminine leader. So Kelly, I read yours about innate creative selves. Yeah, Sonia, I think there are many ways a woman leads, for example, as a mother in work and as a friend. Ellie, I lead children and other teachers at school. I lead my family, and most importantly, myself. As I lead through strong listening skills, self-awareness, bringing high energy and playfulness, being a problem solver, trying to find the learnings from every experience. Yeah, beautiful. Sonia, I think one of the stingiest ways I lead is how I raise my children, and the best way I do that is by modeling. Why do you say stingiest, Sonia? That's interesting. Lindy, I always lead by getting the job done first and then hopefully showing the way to others. I think I first led by fluke. Yeah, I always had initiative, which I think others saw in me. Sonia, I think my most important responsibility as a leader is how I can continue to grow and develop my self-awareness, my curiosity, my vulnerability, and not being afraid to fail, while staying open and positive are my strongest traits. Beautiful. By the way, this is a group of women who've been coached, right? Look, can you hear the self-awareness here?
Absolutely. And I think most women will say, absolutely, I'm a leader. It's just in the quiet moments that you start to drill into it, that you realize there's this little, but I agree, everyone here, I mean, these are wonderful responses, really wonderful responses.
Yeah, they are.
Which is
Strongest, Sonia meant. The strongest leader with her children. Right. I was like, I don't get you as a stingy parent because I think that you've got the biggest heart. Your kids are lucky to have you. Great. Got it. Beautiful. Okay. So we're starting to get there. This is lovely, isn't it? There is some vocabulary here where we're creating a vocab for what it means to lead with the feminine and the importance of that and the power and strength of that. There's nothing wishy-washy about leading from the feminine, right? It's just that it's new and we're learning to value it. So how do we sustain the feminine leader? Like, I know that's something you're really passionate about, Tamsin. How do we sustain the feminine leader? What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I guess there's lots of different contexts that we want to do that. So I don't know everyone here in terms of the kinds of situations you're in, whether you're in a big business or you've got your own business or you're self-employed or contracting. And so I guess in the kind of organizational sense, it's a bit different in the individual sense. But in an organizational sense, if you have a team or an organization or you're engaging a lot, I think it's getting really clear on what are the traits that makes a great leader in your organization and rewarding those and making them very strongly around collaboration, vulnerability, because the culture and what we believe about ourselves needs to be reflected in the way we do things. Otherwise, it kind of won't be reinforced. So that's really important. So there's lots of really interesting models. Like there's a model called ecocentric leadership, which has a lot of dimensions that you can kind of bring in around the greater organization, the greater society, and sort of thinking about those kind of things, which are important. And I think leadership is often not defined, very well or in that way. So it's super important. As individuals, like we are social creatures. We learn a lot through stories and through what other people model. And so I think for me, when I really wanted to learn for myself, one of the things I did was surround myself with women. The Conduit Women's Network was a wonderful space to hear stories and tell stories and think about who we are together and as individuals. And so I think if that's something where you haven't got that network around you, build it. This kind of storytelling, if we were all chatting away here, we would hear the most extraordinary stories, and stories always bring up stories for us in our own minds that are our own stories. And it's the best, hands down, the best way we learn. And experimenting is really, really important. I think as an individual, I was talking to a woman who is a real global player. She's absolutely extraordinary. She's on, she was on the board of WWF globally. She's a leading scientist. She's an absolute rock star. I love her. And she uses feminine mythology, and she reads it every morning and every night. And I hope she's not listening, or she doesn't mind me saying this, but and she's a scientist. She's a very astute scientist. And I think for me, mythology is stories that have stuck for a very long time because they're very true to the human condition. And so I think to have something, and she actually recommended this book, which I haven't read yet, but I've got it right next to me. She said, buy this book and read it. And so I got it, and it's an analysis of mythology of feminine leaders, and you read it as almost a meditative thing. But
can you show it? What's the book?
I haven't read it. It's called The Way of Woman: Awakening the Perennial Feminine, and it's 6 decades of experience looking at symbols from the Bible, mythology, folklore, Greek tragedies, modern poetry. And I think the idea that she brought to me is that maybe this kind of storytelling, this kind of understanding of what it is to be human, isn't something fluffy, and bohemian. And even though I kind of like to be bohemian, but not in public, that kind of thing. But I think that there's something in the stories, whether it's a book like this or the sharing with each other, but allowing that kind of vulnerability, because I think it's going to take a while before we see it in business, or we see it in our lives, and we have to cultivate it for ourselves. So I think for me, the practice is your own practice, finding groups of people that are happy to tell stories. They don't have to be women, it can be men, it could be anyone, but people that you feel safe to really experiment and try out new ideas with, and versions of yourself, I guess. And then, at the organizational level, like, lead confidently from the feminine. And I'm seeing it more and more, very senior women, and it's quite private at the moment, but they're sort of like, well, yes, I do this, but I think actually I'm not put on this earth to be like that. I'm put on this earth to be healing to other people, and I don't really know how that's going to play out for me. But even to use those words for some of these people, I'm like, wow, that's really amazing. This is where I say we need more words for the feminine that we feel comfortable.
Yeah, and we need and we need more spaces that we can have those conversations where a woman like that can tap into her truth and her intuitive self, and her knowingness that I'm here to heal in some way. Like, I don't know how, but like, she probably can't say that at work.
No.
Yet, until she's really like got that part of herself, then maybe she could bring all of herself into work.
And I think that's happening. And then, as Sonia's put a comment down here about, I think the more that women attain in leadership positions, it will allow for change. Absolutely. And like, maybe we wouldn't even be having this conversation if we weren't where we were. It's not obviously anywhere near 50-50, and there's lots of challenges, but I think this is a real possibility to be able to lead in this way. And it'll be a lot, more, I think, going back to my kind of roots, which is in preserving our planet, preserving ourselves, being kind to the people around us, really just living in a more regenerative way. Like, we're not going to make great decisions if we're not fully inside and understanding and loving who we are, because we're just very defensive when we're not doing that. And so rather than be defensive, we want people in those senior leadership positions who are listening, willing to change their mind, willing to say, I don't know, or let's think about it, willing to say, what's everyone feeling and sensing, because it's a part of intuition, and just saying, okay, well, if it doesn't feel right, go away, let's do a bit more research and come back. Like, it's not saying based on a feeling we're going to like shift a strategy. It's more, how do we value and shift that? But I think if we don't do that, I mean, you look at what's happening in board dynamics for women, it's really, really tough, really tough in those environments. And then you think about dialogue, this is between genders, and women are 50% of the population. And then you look at what's happening with, minorities and Black Lives Matter. I mean, there's some horrific things going on in society right now. And we need people in these positions to understand who they are so intimately that they're not defensive. They can hear and listen and create dialogue and make different kinds of decision, whether that be around, some of the social issues that we're facing or environmental challenges we're facing. It's really critical.
It is. I like what Zen has added to that as well. Only if enlightened women achieve leadership roles and support the next generation. Yes, I agree, which is why, leadership starts at home, doesn't it? It starts with ourselves and doing the work. What Sonia's saying, in medicine, 50% of doctors are women, yet only 16% in leadership roles. Talk more about defensiveness. Okay, we can do that. Before we do, I want to open it up to you guys. Like, how are you sustaining yourselves as leaders? You've all shared like how you are leading in the world, whether it's, children at home, at work, different ways. But how do you sustain yourself? Like, I know for me, I was sharing actually with Tamsin the other day, I have my oracle cards. It's my, it was my secret thing. Now it's like I bring them onto my Facebook lives and do readings. But that for me just really connects me back with myself in a really beautiful way. I love my goddess oracle cards. Journaling helps me to sustain myself. Meditation helps me to sustain myself. Having pleasure and fun and joy. So at the moment for me, that looks like paddleboarding. Yeah, like I need my downtime. I had a beautiful hot bath before coming on the call tonight, because I said to my husband, Mama needs 20 minutes. I just need to go and have a hot bath and just like be with me before I can go out again in the world, albeit online. So that's some examples of what I'm doing to sustain myself as a feminine leader. And by the way, sustaining myself also includes doing my work, like doing my transformational work, upgrading my belief systems when I need to, releasing, feeling, crying. So how are you women on the call? How are you sustaining yourselves? Yaz is saying, asking for help. Oh yeah. To do things more has been a big step. Had to break a pattern of feeling bad about it. Still working on it. A wonderful woman at work recently told me, you're a director, you just need to direct. Not sure she realized how significant of an aha of letting go of doing. Yeah, right. Absolutely. Anybody else want to share what their practices are perhaps, and how they're sustaining themselves as leaders? Because you're all, I know most of you on this call, I know, yeah, most of you. So I know you all have your practices. What are they? Do you want to share? Tamsin, what are yours?
Mine, I do regular calls with people that I can say anything to. So during COVID, I plan it around 4 p.m. A couple of days a week for an hour, and I walk. So I move at the same time as talking, and I just get everything, off my chest. I think the gatherings of women at the Conduit has been a really significant thing for me. So I created a set of guidelines around that, where I asked people if they would do a few things for me. One was to not offer anyone any advice, to speak from the I and not share. And I tell you, when you do that, when you say, I think, I feel, and you are really present and you don't offer any advice to someone else, it becomes quite a sacred space quite quickly. And so these moments where I've been talking to these women with a complete sense of honesty and candor and all of that have been always very transformative. I was very serious when I said stories are incredibly powerful, the stories we tell ourselves and the stories others tell us. And so that space is really essential for me. Yoga, the somatic approaches, so the body-based approaches that take me out of my mind and into my physical body, that's really shifted some things, regularly shifts things for me, things I'm dealing with or facing. And I think you said, Katie, really at the beginning, understanding the little control we actually have over our lives. And so understanding that, accepting that, and living with a sense of trust that everything is going to be as it's meant to be, and not trying so hard to do things. And that is allowing you to be who you are at any moment. And that's a big part of like learning what your expression is, because we're not saying, some of us may be very feminine in everything that we do. I don't know, in this group, maybe it's about balance, but it's about knowing yourself. And so for you, if that's body-based, like it is for me, that's great. If it's something else, but it's orienting towards what makes you feel alive, I guess.
Yeah.
And if anything's blocking that, then working through it.
Totally. Let me share what's so Lindy, I think the evolution group's been significant this year in helping me sustain myself. Yeah. Ellie, continuing my healing journey in this group. Jane, listening to my instinct, hanging out with you guys. Yeah, see, already it's like women coming, having a space for women to come together is so important. It's so important. I get that. I might lead this group, but I need this group. Like, I love this. Like, this is my touchstone with other conscious women, awake women. Yeah, so important. Sonia, journaling, music, movement, pleasure, laughter, joy every day, no matter what. This group, yeah. Yes. +1 to journaling and this group and our coaching sessions. Yeah, being supported is so key, I think, for feminine leadership. Kelly, walking, running, yoga, nature immersion, journaling, painting, meditation, everything, all the things, oracle cards for confirmation, support of other like-minded women, evolution membership, woohoo, all the things, yes. I love that, Kelly, it's brilliant. Yeah, I think, yeah, to be a feminine leader, we got to have our girls around us. It's really important in a really safe space. We've got a little bit of time left, and I wondered if anybody wanted to actually share something verbally. So you don't have to, if you want to go and stay in the chat, stay in the chat. But does anybody want to actually have a chat with Tamsin or I, or ask any questions, bring something forward, just a comment? Yeah, yes, go for it. Just unmute yourself.
Oh, sorry, my voice didn't come out there. Hello. That was really, really interesting. Thank you so much. It's so many moments I was like, oh, it's fascinating. Yeah, I wanted to ask a question about specifically around kind of presence and the feminine leadership, because definitely in my experience, like I work in advertising and it's quite male dominated, definitely at the leadership level. And I purposely sort of have over time tried to do things like, sounds a little bit silly, but it, like, you know, putting your arm on the back of the chair so you feel like you take up more space, which is obviously quite like a masculine modeled way. And I'm just really interested in your perspective of kind of like femininely and authentically taking up more space, and also giving yourself kind of permission as a woman to kind of do that in your own way as well. And if you have any stories or thoughts on kind of how to do that, because it is obviously super important to sort of feel comfortable, take up space, give yourself permission. So yeah, really interested in your point of view on that.
Good question. That is such a good question. Yeah, it is so it's really true. So if we, and there's a TED talk on this, which I can share with the group later through Katie, but if you go and stand in the bathroom with your arms up like this, like taking the space, and you walk into a meeting, you are much stronger, you perform better, you feel more capable. And this is actually really interesting about the feminine. The more we reflect on it and see it as powerful, the more it is powerful. Like we are very, but there's there's an example on this point of movement and space, and how our body affects our minds, which is basically what it is, right? If you take up your space, your hand on the chair, your body's telling your mind, I got this, you know, and don't get in my way, and all of those kind of things. There was a peculiar thing that happened where women that were getting Botox who were depressed were getting less depressed. Now, Botox is just a skin-based treatment, right? It has no, but they were also equally less happy. And they found that because their face wasn't moving, it affected the way they felt. And it was a medical experiment, very interesting. And so you're seeing it in, like, that's obviously a slightly tongue-in-cheek example, but if you move, if you smile, you become more happy. If you expand your body, you know, you can imagine the effect of something like yoga, right? Where you're doing these big power poses. It makes you stronger. It makes you more able to deal with things, and it builds your awareness of yourself. So yoga builds an awareness of where your body is in space, which is one of our forms of intelligence, to understand how we're doing, where we are, whether we're sitting up or down or whatever. And so yes, I mean, just a straight yes, it's really, really healthy to think about where your body is in space. It's really healthy to smile. It's really healthy to move. You know, mimicking behavior has all other kinds of effects as well. But I think to find what is authentic for you is important. And when our body is saying it needs to move, you know, I need to shift in my chair, it's because there's something with my energy. I just need to do it. And so just to get really comfortable with allowing your own form of movement, whatever that is, you know. So it can be mimicking, but in time, as you say, you make it your own. But movement and understanding where your own space is something we also can cultivate through all the amazing things you guys are already doing. And that will make you, a stronger person, a more confident leader.
Yeah. I love that. I love the Wonder Woman.
Yes.
Sticking the boobs out. It's brilliant. And I, something that I learned all those years ago when I did my Reiki study, is the idea, because when you're doing hands-on healing, you're taught to, you don't really have to be taught it. We can all do this. You can feel somebody's energy field. It almost feels bouncy in space. It's quite an interesting feeling. But I mean, I'm not tuned in now to do it now, but I could figure out where my own is. It feels kind of bouncy. And sometimes our energy is very tight, like here, and sometimes it's way out here. But we can consciously, intentionally decide where we are. Are we going to contract? Are we going to expand? So in the same way, like the Wonder Woman pose expands our energy and helps us to take up space, we can just choose to kind of tune into our energy and just decide that, like, I could focus on, I would probably tune into my heart, and I would tune into the love in my heart, and I would consciously choose to expand the love in my heart throughout my body, and then I would expand it beyond my body, and then I would take it bigger, and I would just allow myself to go into that meeting with that bigger energy. Does that make sense?
It makes sense.
And it is felt by others. I mean, you can feel somebody whose energy is contracted, and you can feel the presence of somebody that walks in the room and is like, I'm good. And hello, I value myself. I'm here. I've arrived. We can feel that. Yeah. Any other questions or comments, or how's everybody feeling from this conversation? I'd love to know how you're feeling. Just wave at me if you want to speak. Come on. No questions? Really?
I don't love a story. Does anyone have a story? I love stories. No stories tonight. If there's something you want to share, I mean, I think, as I say, it's the most brilliant way to learn is through these stories. Probably too late at night, maybe.
I tell you what, I would really like to know how everybody's feeling. So if you could just unmute yourself, because I actually want to hear you say it as well. If you could just all unmute yourselves, and I'll read out your name, because you don't know what order I mean when I'm going around. My view will be different to your view. I just would love to know how you're feeling, how this has landed for you tonight. So I'm going to start because Sonia's first on my view. Sonia, how are you feeling, honey?
I feel inspired. I think I have been practicing for the past several years to try to change my leadership style from a masculine doer into a more feminine perspective, because I think it's more productive. But it's I have found it challenging still working in tremendous patriarchy. It just is, and it doesn't. I make it discouraged, but I don't give up, kind of thing. Like, it's just like finding another way in through doing it, because all that behavior. Like, and this is what I've been contemplating as you're speaking. I think about all the skills or all whatever it took for me to get to success. Right? Those were all, and I would learn them. They're conditioned, and they're masculine. It's a doing perspective. But then I think those same behaviors, like any strength, becomes a weakness when overused. I don't think they're the same skill set to keep me or to grow into this other realm. So that's why I was asking about the defensiveness, because sometimes I think what happens when I try to do something new or get innovative.
Oh, I've lost you, Sonia. Darling, I can't hear you. Are you still there? Oh.
Yeah, we can't hear you.
I'm sorry, I can't hear you. Maybe type what you were trying to say, Sonia, and we'll respond, because unfortunately I can't hear you. Not working. Okay, I'm just going to mute. Oh, yeah, it won't let me mute either. There's something going on with the internet. Oh. Hello? How are you feeling?
Me?
Yeah.
I found tonight, I think there were so many bits which kind of resonated with me, and sort of it was fascinating, that absolutely fascinating. And I think that actually, no, what I feel at the moment, I actually feel a bit tired now because I think I've been so focused actually during it that actually now I feel a bit of a release, but quite calm, because actually going through it feels a little bit like we have a journey to go on to get there, but actually underneath it all, when I list my traits of what a good leader should be, there's some of them which I'm thinking tick, 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 and some I'm thinking, oh, that's to work on, that's to work on. So I think in that, or actually maybe that's not to work on, that's to just notice, or is that where I'm being led by the masculine, or reacting to a masculine, and how can I react in a more authentic way to the balance within me of the masculine and the feminine energy that feels good for me. So yeah,
I think that's such a great point of like authenticity. Like there isn't a should. Like a lot of women, when I talk about feminine traits, they're like, yeah, it's just not really how I operate, and they genuinely have to really work super hard to get the full spectrum. But I think the idea is to try and get as close to the full spectrum as you can, but in your own combination, in your own recipe, because we don't want to deny any part of ourselves that should be expressing because of any reason, but it's your own. Everyone is completely different in their combination, for sure. That's really interesting. Thank you.
I'm just responding to Sonia in the chat. Yeah, thanks, Flo. That's gorgeous. Jane, how are you feeling? Are you able to talk? Oh, I can't hear you. Oh.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, I can.
Oh. It's a bit loud. Yeah, it's been quite a revelation to me, because I came from I'm self-employed now, but I came from an industry where I didn't really have very good role models of female leaders. It was a very kind of quite a bullying, macho culture from my female bosses. To the point where when I kind of got as high as well, might have gone higher, but I just kind of completely dropped out and went freelance because I couldn't cope with the atmosphere in some of the offices I worked. So I've got quite negative kind of connotations when you say female leader until we started doing this month, really. And I didn't see myself as a leader because that's what I pictured. And I think, well, I'm not like that. I'm not like that person or people were to me.
Yeah, like you don't want to be a bitch to be a leader.
No, I can't be a bitch. No.
Yeah. But that's the disempowered leadership model, though, isn't it? So what we're looking for is bringing the empowered masculine together with the empowered feminine into leadership.
Yeah. So it's been this month has been quite a revelation, and I think in one of the other calls you were saying, "Are you a leader?" And I think I was about the only one who said no, because I'm kind of too timid and shy, and I didn't see that hadn't been my experience of what I'd seen. So yeah, really interesting, fascinating.
It's a very powerful thing to share, you know. And whether we share it or not, it's always there, right? And it's only when we can find it that it gets its full power, so thank you so much for sharing that.
Okay.
Yeah, thanks, Jane. Lindy, how are you feeling?
I'm always really tired after these sessions. I honestly feel railroaded, and I'm going to bed in a minute. I listen to everything, and I sometimes feel like a bit of not a bystander, but having been past my working life as such, and I haven't now worked because I sold a business 16 years ago. So I was fortunate to retire at 48, I think. God knows. I look back and think, oh God, I wish I was doing this then. I mean, I would have had such a more exciting, less stressful time. I was a very emotional leader. I really did everything from the gut, and I was always in a very male-orientated world. So I just wish I had this then. However, I do think, oh, it's really quite exciting. There's still time to do something else. And I'm so motivated by this, what's happened this year, that I see excitement. I feel excitement, actually. So who knows?
I'm so excited to see what's next for you, Lindy. So excited. Yeah, there's a fire in your belly that's been lit for sure.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, that's great. Rebecca, how are you feeling?
Yeah, hopeful, I think. Yeah, I suppose I felt a bit strange about this month on leadership because I'm not currently doing anything. And my background is as a head teacher, and which is a strange situation, a bit like I think Sonia said about medicine. So in primary schools, lots of teachers are women, but lots of the heads are men. And in my last couple of years, we became an academy, and the CEO, all the leadership, all men, and a very big structure and a lot of bullying. And I couldn't be the sort of leader that I wanted to be. And in fact, I was I was literally told I was too female, too nice, to listening to other people too much. So yeah, I left. But yeah, so hopeful, I think, listening to it tonight and thinking about how I can take some of that into my future.
Yeah, it's not a journey for the faint-hearted, right? Being yourself is it's probably the hardest thing you ever do. And the context like this, I mean, that's you need your job. It's not like we can all just kind of quit and want. Although a lot of women are quitting and doing what they want.
Yeah,
happening more and more. But no, I'm sorry you went through that.
No, that's all right. I mean, it was a huge learning curve for me, really, just about my values, really. I mean, I was asked, why I wouldn't stay, and I said, well, I can't, because I can't sleep at night. I can't be this person that you want me to be, and execute decisions that I don't agree with. Yeah.
This is the when people say, how do you know who you are? You often know who you are when you're pushed to the absolute limit, and you're like, this is what I am absolutely not. And then you're on the hunt for like what the alternative is.
Yeah. No, that's oh my God, yeah, that's it. That you've hit the nail on the head. And when you said about, really resonated with me when you said about letting go of your old selves, because I was sort of like teacher and then head teacher, and then this last couple of years it's been like, well, who am I? Yeah, thank you.
Oh, thank you for sharing.
Thanks, Rebecca. Liz, you're next on my screen. How are you? How are you feeling?
I'm good. So I have so many things going through my head. So yeah, it's hard to kind of formulate what I want to say, really. I do, just from what you've just said there, I do feel like there was a moment where I was writing stuff down about letting go of your former self and then not knowing who you are. I have been through that. I did and I remember all that kind of feeling, and so I'm feeling very grateful that I've kind of been through, I feel like I've been through the big letting go. And then what I'm feeling now is there's still bits to shed. What were you, when you were, it's about the flow state and letting go of some of the things to just, and when I was listening to you talking about that, Tamsin, I felt excited, and it's all about joy. It's like, it's all about joy. It's about letting your joy be such a part of your life that you can almost like joyfully skip through it all. I mean, it sounds kind of a bit lame, really, but that's how I feel right now.
Yeah.
And I don't have to sit in boardrooms. I don't have a classic office job. So maybe in a way it's easier for me that I don't have to battle that patriarchy, head to head all the time. But I feel that I can definitely continue to become a better version of myself by just practicing the flow. I think for me, that's just really important going forward. So it's been really enlightening, like tonight, really, really good for me. So thank you.
Oh, it's a pleasure. And I love what you said. Like, why can't we have joy and feel great? And obviously, amidst bad circumstances, there are ways of having gratitude and whatever. And the more you do that, the more your body recovers from the negative things that are happening, because our bodies can't be on 24 hours a day. We have to find ways to switch them off. And joy's, I mean, why wouldn't you pick joy? If you could pick all the ways of switching off, why wouldn't you, think about orienting in that way? And actually it creates the resilience that you've just described. It really does. So yeah, you can share that wherever you can, teach other people, teach us. It's always so interesting hearing how people do that in their days. So thank you very much for sharing that.
Thanks, Liz. Kelly, how are you feeling?
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah, hi. Sort of tired, I think, from keeping up with that conversation. There's just so much. And I find I can't write in the chat and listen at the same time. So I'm not very good at that. Anyway, yes, it made me think, I'm glad I'm out of the corporate world. Really kind of was one of the reasons, no, it wasn't the reason, but a big reason why I wanted out of that whole environment many years ago now. And I've kind of think, I'm in amongst, I work with women, I'm in this group of women, I'm coached by women. It's a women's world, really, in my little world. And then I hear other people's stories and it really just isn't like that, of course. So I don't know, it's given me a whole, I know it's not like that in the world, but it just, I don't know, in people's daily lives, I realise in their work life, they're up against this a lot more than I am now. And it's just, I've just got more appreciation for the sad fact that it's still a struggle for feminine leadership to be recognised or appreciated, or the fact that it still isn't quite the language around it. That was really interesting. We still can't really pinpoint what those aspects are. So that made me actually think, God, yeah, we really have a duty to do that for ourselves and the future generation.
Yeah.
You know, having a daughter, it's making me think.
Yeah, you know, it really does. It sounds like you're doing it though. I think actually constructing your life in such a way that you can be who you are and be around people that support that, you're going to draw people into your orbit and they're going to appreciate that. I think, you know, we all have like our own role to play in, but it's primarily just being as much yourself as you can, because the rest of it, I mean, we can only change our little world around us, and if we're sinking, then we're not going to keep everyone else afloat, you know. So well done on doing that work. I think your life sounds very nice.
Well, yeah, that's one side of it. Okay, thank you.
Kelly, you know, you've made choices because you know yourself to put yourself in environments that have you in flow state. I mean, you're a woman that reflects flow to me a lot of the time. So,
but it's creativity, really. That's what really flagged it. Talking about the flow state made me realize, okay, I know when I'm creating, I'm in flow state, but it actually reminded me that I create to get inspired. I don't wait for inspiration to come to create. So that to me is like, that's how you get into flow state, or that's one way to get into flow state, is to actually create. And then if people feel like they're in the flow, then they'll do something amazing. But you kind of got to do it the other way around. And then it feeds off the flow state. But,
yeah, agreed.
Yeah, love that. Thank you. I'm going to zoom through to Ellie, because I know we're over time now, so but I really want to hear what you have to say. How are you feeling, Ellie?
Hi. Well, initially I felt quite confused actually, because until Jane spoke, because I thought what Jane said about the role models that she's had, and maybe pulling a bit of what Rebecca was saying as well, of having quite masculine leadership, and that the women that I have had as head teachers, this isn't you, Rebecca, have tended to have been more masculine in their approach. So when there's been a couple of head teachers in my aura, and I'm like, oh, I wish I could have worked for them, and they would have been brilliant because they had the more feminine qualities that I would have appreciated. And then about a year ago, I did move to, and it's actually an all-female team. There's only one guy who comes in who's an artist, and that's it. And the difference in the energy is amazing, actually. Not having any men in the building at all is really interesting. And I think the what I was talking about with the children and the flow state, I'm really appreciating that, because I work with quite young children, so they're in flow all the time. You know, they are just creating, playing, and that's when they're learning, and that's when they're doing what, you know, kids do. And to remember that, I think I took that away, that actually be more childlike sometimes and just play, and those things that fill you with joy will maybe fill your bucket enough to be able to play and to cope with doing your job, or whatever it is you've got to do, or the things of life. And yeah, those were my main takeaways. Thank you.
I love that. I love that. Play. It's like so fundamental. Yeah, it's I have a 3-year-old, so I relate to that.
It can be really hard to play. I sometimes find it really hard, and you don't want to play shops and don't want to play those you know, those things all the time. So yeah, but to really, when you get into it and can flow with them, then that's lovely, and that's really nice. So yeah,
Great.
Thank you.
That's beautiful. Thank you, Ellie. And you know, I've just realized in asking if you guys wanted to share anything, I can imagine that most of you went into your heads and we had silence. But as soon as you ask the question, how do you feel? Look how much information we received. And stories were told and shared, and like I just thought that was really interesting. Anywho, we need to wrap up. Tamsin, thank you so much for your time tonight. You are a woman, just, you blow me away. You are full of just so much gold. So much gold. You're a woman that definitely knows herself and is on the journey to knowing herself even more. And I just want to like get inside your brain.
That's a scary place, but it's been a real pleasure to speak to you all, and I've learnt a lot from each of you. I think everyone's journey is utterly unique, and I think the one thing I would just ask everyone to take away is that they are leaders, and to live knowing that and make decisions knowing that, and that to lead is not to instruct, it is to guide. And you know, I think that's really the big thing for today, is to guide people in a way that is just really you. But thanks for the opportunity. It's been really nice to chat to you all.
Yeah, I wish we were all in the same room together right now, to be honest. This is great, and I just want to kind of like feel you in a room. Thank you all for joining. There's lots of thank yous there in the chat. The name of that book title, yes, Rebecca, it's called The Way of Women. Is that right?
Yeah, The Way of Woman by Helen.
Oh, The Way.
And I've just been scanning it. I haven't even read it yet, but it's been recommended very highly. Helen M. Luke, The Way of Woman. And but I think really it's anything on like the mythology of feminine, or the archetypes, and just reflecting on what they are and listening to stories and what that tells you about who you are as well.
Love it. Love it. I'm definitely going to I think that would be a great book club book, wouldn't it? Yeah. Maybe we'll have to do that. Watch this space. All right. Thanks everybody for joining, and so fun to take this conversation out into the wider world outside of the membership just this once. But if you're watching the replay and you're not an Evolution member and you want to find out more, just send me a direct message and I'll let you know all about it. Good to have you all. Thank you again, Tamsin. I want to have more conversations with you. This is so exciting. This is flow state for me. Total flow state. Love you all. Have a beautiful rest of your evening, and yeah, see you soon. Bye. Bye.